So what was the plan for this first round?
So it's
even though the drivers have been laying down a lot of rubber last week, still get sand blown across the track a little bit through the week, and so it's not truly representative. But of course, we don't know the pecking order at all, so we're going to try and cling on to everything for the next hour and see what we can decipher.
every moment covered for you across the year as we look down at the garages. To give you an idea of what's been happening out on circuit before we reach the opening session of the season, all the cars wheeled out into the pit lane for what is called show and tell. Every team having to wheel to the pit lane. The assembled press here pour into the pit lane. They look at all the details. No more launch spec. You've got to get out there with the real thing. And we were looking at Oscar Piastri, moments away from the debut. Let's go downstairs to Will Buxton as we approach the green light.
Thanks so much, Jakesy. Welcome back to the fam, my friend. I'm down here outside Alpine as we have a green light at the end of the pit lane and a team that there is a lot of consideration around. We love to bring you all the tech updates in FP1 throughout the year, and today is no different, believe it or not, because Alpine have upgrades on their car already for race one. As Lawrence intimated, that front wing that the team is running is an upgrade, and it was done so early and the team was so ahead of the game, they managed to get it on for a little bit of pre-season testing as well. The team tell me there's also a little aero upgrade on the rear suspension, and if you'll believe this, and this is something we've been talking about all the way through testing, pink apparently is a lighter paint color than the blue, so that should give them a performance advantage. There goes the Red Bull of Sergio Perez, and of course this is the first time we will see two cars for every team out on track, just a single car for them during testing. And I'm going to throw it back to you guys before JP gets run over.
Probably wise, thank you, Will. George Russell has a new crash helmet livery, which explains why the numbers and the details on that car the bright green. He's finally brought his new spec. Now, this is a proud moment for Logan Sargent, who at many points of his junior racing career surely gave up on this moment being realized. He's been in FP1 before, but never as the team's main driver, and that is superb for him. A teammate to Alex Albon, but perseverance and believing in his talent gets driver who finished 4th in the Formula 2 Championship last year to Formula 1, one of 3 rookies in the field.
Always quite a surreal moment as a rookie embarking on a full Formula 1 season. Sargent's been in the behind the wheel of the Williams in a race weekend before, in a few FP1s at the end of last year. So this isn't alien to him. Of course, he's driven this car for a day and a half, very accomplished last week in testing, but now he's embarking on his own journey this season into Formula 1 in the Williams team. Oscar Piastri in a McLaren, he's out of the garage as well and on an outlap. Nick de Vries in the AlphaTauri, he's shown what he can do last season at Monza with a superb debut and scoring points for Williams. He's now at AlphaTauri and is already left the garage and is on an outlap. And we've got Nico Hulkenberg back as well. So a few drivers who are going to be back into an FP1 in a full-fledged way for this season, and they're all left the garage.
So 2 cars out there. There is Nick de Vries. Very unusual these days to make your Formula 1 debut at 28 for the full season, but that's what he's doing. And the Dutch driver, a former Formula 2 champion, a former Formula E champion.
Rear wing there for Charles Leclerc. Just that wobble, coming through turn 8. And so there's 9 drivers done a lap time, everyone else biding their time, and the Mercedes still sitting in the garage.
Checking in with the world champion for the first time in an F1 weekend, Max Verstappen out there, and he is lining up. His teammates said a time for 1:35.0, just behind Fernando Alonso, who's currently the fastest. Red Bull claiming that constructors title last year for the first time since 2013, ending the Mercedes domination of the turbo hybrid era. And Verstappen with 2 crowns to his name, looking to move to I always think the third is always an ambition of a driver. We always heard from Fernando Alonso. I think it's purely because a lot of drivers looked at how many titles Senna had. It's almost the Senna standard, a third championship. That's what Verstappen is aiming for this year.
I was going to say the third is what you aim for when you got the two in the bag, isn't it?
Yeah, true.
Then you go for number 3, and Fernando Alonso's been on that
for years.
17 years. As I said that, it sounded ridiculous, but
well, he had a board. They were doing lots of photo shoots just a couple of doors down from our office here at the circuit, and when you see season 23 for Fernando Alonso, you think it cannot be real. The longest ever Formula One career by every metric possible. Kilometers raced, Grand Prix done, time since debut. Tomorrow, 22 years exactly in Formula One.
He was the youngest champion.
Yep.
He was the youngest double world champion as well, because number 2 came straight after number 1 for Fernando back in 2005, 2006. That was then beaten by Sebastian Vettel. Vettel's been and gone in Formula One, and Fernando's still there. And now it's Max Verstappen that's, he didn't beat Vettel's record actually for youngest champion, did he, Max? But he's taken a lot of the other youngest records, and now he's gunning for number 3. And it's Fernando Alonso, top of the times, after the opening gambits in the Aston Martin that's looking good. But here comes Max Verstappen in the Red Bull that's surely looking like the class of the field after testing. He's 3/10 down after 2 sectors, Jakesy.
If only you could have seen Jolien's face there. Worth saying, I'm pretty sure Pierre Gasly was top of this session this time last year. And we know that's from memory, so that might not be right.
No, I think it was, wasn't it?
So it might not be the entire picture, but here is Max Verstappen on the medium tyre, over the line, and he's 0.3 of a second adrift of Fernando Alonso. And if Lance Stroll makes it a 1-2, we will be able to hear you gasp from your living room, wherever in the world you're watching. It is so great to have your company as we embark on another season of Formula One, and Lando Norris puts it over the line. We were mentioning Gasly a few moments ago. Alpine, a lot of question marks about them. We're going to get some answers today, but upgrades as we heard from Lawrence. And then Will, I feel sorry for the man that we were just looking at on screen. Felipe Drugovich was the driver in your picture, the reigning Formula 2 champion, dominant season last year, did brilliantly, and it is great to have Lance back in the car. It's good that he's been able to recover in time, but what a shame, because those opportunities don't always come around, and Felipe Drugovich would have been dreaming of a debut. Let's check in with Piastri.
Oh, wow, that's a big snap from Piastri there.
And Oscar, is the car all okay?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Just had a snap.
Yeah, just on that apex curve coming down through turn 7 there on the final left, and the McLaren just very stiff, riding it harshly. And actually, Oscar was the only driver that had a spin in pre-season testing, again riding harshly over the bumps at this point on the final day. And again, the McLaren riding the bumps, the curbs very harshly, and that was a huge snap. Very, very well caught. But yeah, Stroll's done an outlap, started a push lap, and then came straight back in. So we'll monitor how he's getting on, because he's getting his first taste of the Aston Martin here, of course, with
And Oscar, is the car all okay?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Just had a snap.
Maybe in the next couple of years. 50 minutes to go. We're on board with the driver who won the Formula 2 championship a couple of years ago. Had to have that reserve year, bit of testing in an old Alpine, then the move to McLaren, when it seemed to him and his management that it was only the Williams drive that was on offer. They signed with McLaren. He makes his debut, and he can forget about the year out as he moves across the line, and you could hear the bouncing as he went down the main straight. 136.2 for Oscar Piastri, who was a rookie winner of the Formula 3 championship, a rookie winner of the Formula 2 championship. And look at this, didn't even know this was coming up. Perfect timing from the graphics department. Unbelievable, undefeated all the way back to 2018.
Yeah, that 2018 stat there, 8th place. And ever since then, he's won everything he's been in. Oscar Piastri. First flyer for him. Oh, he's done a couple of flyers, but first proper one, having not nearly binned it at turn 7, jumps him to 5th place. Look behind Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. Now, Alpine showed nothing through pre-season testing. But Gasly straight away, he said yesterday, I'll tell you what we'll be more competitive than we were last week, and they're showing it straight away.
Message there for a team member at Haas who sadly passed away, and the team remembering her with a graphic on the front of Nico Hülkenberg's car there that we were looking at as he returns. There's a couple of years out of the sport, no more super subbing for him. He is back for the full season. Piastri going through our picture, and here's Valtteri Bottas in the slightly tweaked livery of the Alfa Romeo. Valtteri Bottas did all of the heavy lifting of his campaign last year in the early rounds. In fact, he went 10 races without scoring a point last year, something he hadn't done since he was with the Williams team. Last year, it was all about Alfa Romeo having the lightest car and having to score points whilst that was the case, as the other teams then developed and whittled the weight away. This year, he's got a second year with the team. He is in a really happy place, though, personally. He seems constantly, it's almost replacing Daniel Ricciardo with the amount of time that he's had a smile on his face in the paddock.
Yeah, you wouldn't have thought there'd be Bottas would be the obvious smiler after Ricciardo from his Mercedes time, where the pressures were on him, and ultimately he was beaten squarely by Hamilton through those years. But at Alfa Romeo, he seems so at home. He just seems to have a really nice balance about his life at the moment. He's enjoying his racing, I think, more than he's ever done. And the Alfa Romeo car might keep that smile on his face from what we saw last week. Looked pretty good. And Valtteri, he scored so well at the start of last season.
Let's hear from Logan Sargent.
I could smell something burning on the first lap.
Okay.
So he's still out there, Sargent, and he's just done a personal best on the hard tyre. So no huge concern there.
So whatever the issue was, seems to have rectified itself. Perez has the fastest time in the session so far. It's a 1:34.3. It is a hefty chunk ahead of Fernando Alonso. And half a second ahead, and then Verstappen with just these early pace runs. Hamilton's gone ahead of Gasly to complete the top 5.
I could smell something burning on the first lap.
Okay. The tyre, as Jonan pointed out to you, but the majority of those running on the medium, like Bottas is. Let's roar past the commentary box then, and if we look down to the pit lane, we see Will Buxton standing there.
Now look at the back of Carlos Sainz's car. Look at the double strut that secures the rear wing on as he drives away. That is the rear wing that Ferrari were running for the majority of testing. Now you guys would have seen a wobble out of Charles Leclerc's rear wing. That rear wing is secured by a single strut in the middle. That's a slightly higher downforce rear wing that Ferrari ran for just a few moments in pre-season testing until the DRS failed on that specification of rear wing. Fascinating, and seeing them back-to-backing those two different rear wings on Carlos and Charles' car. And clearly for Ferrari, still some issue with that single pylon attachment, giving it that little bit of wobble. DRS hasn't failed as yet, but yeah, doesn't look to be quite as secure as that double pylon.
Thank you, William. Now, if you're a keen F1 TV viewer, you might be asking, where is my Sam Collins content? Well, I'm delighted to say that we do have the main man himself standing by and ready to tell us all about what he's noticed so far as we move from 2022 to 2023, Sam.
Thanks, Alex. And it's not just the cars that are getting upgrades here at the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend. The rules have had an upgrade too. And that's the first big change that everybody was talking about, was the floor edge rising by about 15 millimeters, the width of an average finger. Now, that's been spoken about a little bit more. There have been some changes to the diffuser shape as well. That's been revised. That's all to stop the cars hopping up and down and doing this porpoising motion that we all talked about up to the Azerbaijan Grand Prix last year. However, there was a reduction in the minimum weight of the cars. Now, that was going to be 2 kilos lighter than it was last year. However, on the 22nd of February, the FIA confirmed that they'd taken that reduction in the minimum weight away. So the cars now weigh roughly the same as they did last year. However, there is still a 1 kilogram increase in the minimum weight of the power units of the car. So the teams are still having to fight that to get the cars down to the minimum weight as much as possible. The roll hoops of the cars have also been strengthened, which puts a lot more weight up high on the car. A lot of people thought that would outlaw the rollover blades that we see Alfa Romeo using. Well, that's clearly not the case because they've still done it. There have also been some very detailed aerodynamic changes which were aimed at removing some of the outwashing devices we saw some of the teams like Mercedes using last year. The teams have read the regulations and have found ways around those rule changes to try to find a little bit of difference. So you'll see those cut out still in the Mercedes front wing. They've just done some very clever legality tricks to keep it within the regulations. One big change that you did see was Aston Martin's big high downforce rear wing with those end plate extensions on. That has very definitely been banned, and you won't see that coming back this year at any point. The other big change you're going to notice on every single car, you can see very clearly on the Haas going around the track at the moment, big rear view mirrors to make it safer for drivers to see other drivers coming up behind you and trying to put moves on you. Every single car has bigger rear view mirrors. And then just a final point to make, something that's looking at the lap time. Sergio Perez's fastest lap of 34.3 on the clock was slightly quicker than that of Fernando Alonso. But Fernando Alonso left the pits with a lot less fuel on board than either of the Red Bulls. He was about 9 kilograms lighter. So perhaps the Red Bull pace is a little bit stronger than the Aston Martin, certainly a bit more than the timing sheets show up. Alex.
Thank you very much, Sam. Sam Collins across all of the data. And interesting insight on the fuel level for Fernando Alonso as he left the pits. As we say hello, first of all, to Günther Steiner, and now to Toto Wolff, cycling through various shots into the garage.
Steiner and his former driver as well, Mick Schumacher, now reserve at Mercedes. Fascinating, the insight. I'm only on season 2, episode 2 of Drive to Survive, but I've got into all the Günther and Mick debate already, and it was a tough season for Mick, and you could see the tensions at Haas because they needed the second driver to score points. Mick actually got there and he did a decent job, but now he's at Mercedes. And he seemed comfortable in the team. George Russell was saying that he's done a good job for them. Looking around on track last week. And in the meantime, Nico Hulkenberg is in at Haas. And on those soft tyres, he's gone 7th. K-Max 4th. Haas are the only team that have used the soft, though.
Let's go back downstairs to Will Buxton, who's made his way to McLaren.
There's no keeping our powder dry this morning, guys. There's so much going on in the pit lane. Now, you remember in pre-season testing, these wheel brows were a major issue for McLaren. They were having to do a lot of work on the inside to strengthen them and secure them so that they wouldn't fail. You'll notice they're currently cleaning off a huge amount of flow vis around that section, but also through the ducting going to the brakes there, the cake tin brakes on the side. You see just the residual amount of flow vis left inside that ducting. I'm wondering, and Sam can probably answer, if airflow to the brakes and the potential overheating is what might have caused that structure, that part of the car to have failed during testing. They said that they had a fix in place that they would bring to this weekend, but obviously that flow is going around those newly strengthened wheel brows. Crucially important for McLaren because that was one of the reasons that they didn't get very much running. You see, it's just giving them a bit of a wobble. That's the ultimate test. Give it a hit, give it a wobble. If it's wobbling more than it should, you've got a problem. But yeah, that is a point of concern for McLaren and was all the way through testing. So far, so good. As they wipe off the flow vis and get ready to send Lando Norris. Actually, no, that's Oscar Piastri. Get ready to send Oscar Piastri back on his way.
Thank you, Will. Sam, let's bring you in immediately then to cover off some of the questions that Will Buxton was posing to you.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I think it's down to weight saving. That's what McLaren were trying to achieve with those wheel brow components. Will's absolutely right. That gets really hot in that area. You've got the brake cake tins where the brake discs and pads are in there. There has been a change to the regulation on the brake pads for this year. Teams are no longer allowed to run ventilated brake pads with drillings all the way through, which will make it a little bit harder for them to cool the brakes. And when they were working on those parts last week in the test, I was noticing that it wasn't just the cracks in the wheel brows that McLaren were fixing. There were some elements deep down in the cooling circuits of the car as well around those brakes. So I do wonder if it has just got a bit too hot, and McLaren have tried to make it as light as possible and it's snapped off, and that's why. But the fix they had at testing looked like they've been down to the local hardware store, bought some wood.
The pedal felt quite different to last time.
Brake warming up.
they've solved that problem, and things don't look quite as bad for McLaren as they may have looked at the end of the test, according to some of the GPS data. So I think maybe McLaren are a bit more up into the midfield than maybe we thought a little while ago. And just a point on that carbon fibre failing for lightness, and problems creeping in when you try to make things a little bit too light. The way that Ferrari rear wing wobbling was going on, that was scary. And I could see if you did that for a race distance, you might end up with fatigue failure. It's a bit like when you wobble a teaspoon after a little while and it'll snap off. I wonder if Ferrari are going to be taking a close look at that rear wing spot, because it looks mighty weak to me.
Yeah, looked beyond flexing, didn't it, when we saw that shot? If you've just pressed play, great to have your company. Sam referring to a shot that we saw of the Ferrari where the rear wing really did appear to be vibrating far more than originally designed. If you were watching testing last week, you're thinking, who on earth has got the pink car? That is Alpine, and they will have that livery for the first 3 races of the season. Some tweaks going down at McLaren with those new enlarged wing mirrors, as we get a comparison between Piastri and Norris's early laps in the opening minutes of the season.
It was the whole rear wing assembly that was flexing, moving a huge amount in the Ferrari. So disconcerting, and for the driver, if that fails, you're heading towards a pretty big accident. Luckily, there's some runoff around this track, and you're not too close to the barriers, but you can probably still find them if that rear wing suddenly had a catastrophic failure. Ferrari have had a slow start to this session as well. They've actually done decent amount of laps. Sainz on 9. Leclerc on 8, but they're running through a different program. 2.5 down on Perez's pace out front. So it's all difficult to read at this stage. Only Haas on the soft tyres, most on the mediums, but the fuel loads, as per usual in FP1, all over the place in the ramp plan.
Just let the guys double check my pedal position. It seems like the brake and the throttle is the opposite direction compared to the test.
Canadian driver who had the surgery and missed testing, but is back behind the wheel of the car, still without the mileage that he would so crave. And remember, when we're going into FP2, if you're one of our newer fans, we're going to be doing race simulations. We'll have our quali simulation, but then we'll get into the long run, which gives us an idea, the most realistic picture of the pecking order so far. But at the moment, no appearance as we tick down beyond the opening minutes.
And of all the drivers out there, one guy really needs the laps, and it's Stroll. He wasn't here last week. He was having some surgery on his right wrist, and he hasn't done a flying lap yet in this car. Everyone else has been pounding around for a day and a half each, 3 days total in these cars, and now they're going again, and they're all hooked up already. That's why we saw straight away there was some cars didn't even need to do an install lap, and they were just getting straight on with it. The Tsunoda, AlphaTauri, and De Vries, his teammate, have done 11 laps, and they're back in the pits now, but they've clocked up more mileage, and they're straight into the run plan. And Stroll, for whatever reason, just did an start at a push lap and has come back into the garage. He's sitting there patiently waiting, so maybe it's something wrong mechanically with his car, but Alonso's done a fair amount of laps.
Will Buxton has made his way to the garage in question, down there at Aston Martin.
Yeah, and there appears to be quite a major issue at the rear of the car. Electronics boxes being removed and reattached. What looks like some hydraulic work going on as well. Essentially, large syringes that we see with fluid within hydraulic fluid hanging off on the side of the car as they, I think, attempt to refill some of the lines. But a big amount of work going on this right-hand side of Lance Stroll's car. It's not a comfort thing. It's not a simple setup thing. There's an awful lot of work going on, as you can see at the back of the car as well, in the white shirt, Martin Whitmarsh. So much experience in his time at McLaren, overseeing all the work going on to the car here. Lawrence Stroll was at the back of the garage just watching on. He's just left. But yeah, this is not run-of-the-mill at all for Lance Stroll. It's not a setup change. There is quite a lot of work being done on that Aston Martin.
Thank you very much, Will.
What a tough break for him. Again, of all the drivers that needed the mileage, and he's the one driver that's stuck in the garage. And the Aston Martin ran pretty cleanly last week as well. In fact, most of the teams ran really cleanly. Reliability was was so high. I mean, the amount of laps drivers were doing, upwards of 150 laps around this circuit.
If anything, it was too clean, and it was too event free, especially when you're having to commentate on it. But we waded through. I cracked down there, and he will be continuing to lead the team. Fernando Alonso joining, the first time since his debut team with Minardi that he's joined a outfit without the championship pedigree, all the various different guises, and he will be attempting to haul Aston Martin to the front of the field. They've made some big signings in the design department. I think Dan Fallows has made his way over from Red Bull. They had the big upgrade last year. The team very nearly picked Alfa Romeo to the place in the 6th place in the Constructors' Championship. They outscored them 39-4 in the final 12 races. So they're a team on an upward trajectory. They have been the talk of the town after testing. There's many predicting that they would be at the head of the midfield. And now Alonso just trying to back that up. At the moment, he's second fastest. But the caveat that this is not always the most representative session that we get. We might have to wait for FP2 to get the true picture.
And Alonso's still out on the first set of medium tyres that he put on at the start of the session. Behind him, there's a Red Bull. Max Verstappen on an outlap on the soft tyres. So let's wait and see what Verstappen does. Perez is also on an outlap on some soft tyres. And Hamilton has just been on a set of mediums and jumped to third, so improving the pace of the Mercedes. But Red Bull's on the soft tyres, and we're going to see the times tumble, I'd have thought, heading towards halfway through this hour session.
Driver's eye view, fantastic camera, giving you, how close is this to reality? Is the closest we've ever got?
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with this camera when it came. Just the detail of the steering wheel, the looking. We could see when the drivers are looking to the mirrors and exactly what they're doing. And Fernando then just changing the engine mode as he came over the start-finish line there at the end of his lap, presumably into a slower lap now, recharge on and get the energy from the battery back up to the top. It's a great shot, the visor cam.
It's Fernando Alonso at turn 4, and that lap would be deleted.
Oh, there already. Forgot about that. We've got track limits back.
Yeah,
blissfully managed to not talk about it throughout testing, and now it's going to be back. At turn 4 is the crucial corner where we've seen a bit of controversy in the past with that one. Remember 2021?
2021, very, very controversial. Just after getting the lead, being told to give it back. Perez has just done the fastest first sector of the session so far, and it is a very, very quick turn of pace. They are on the soft tyres. And Jodin, take us through it.
So we've got actually a nice comparison of Max and Checo on the same tyre at the same time. Perez at the top of the times at the moment. Wow, he used a lot of road on the way into turn 11. Even got over to the apron on the right-hand side. Still managed to turn it in and keep the speed now pinned up through turn 12. 1.2 seconds up on his own personal best, but he's on a softer compound tyre. It was very evenly matched with Verstappen through the first sector. Verstappen's only done one flyer on that first run on the mediums. Then he came through the pits and hasn't improved. That's why you got the big difference in the first set of tyres. Here comes Checo now to the line with the soft tyres on, gonna set the benchmark, and he's actually up on Verstappen through 2 sectors.
There you go, 1:32.758 for Sergio Perez on the soft tyre. And what can Verstappen do immediately in response? We're going to find out as he waits and waits longer still for the car to turn its way through the final 2 corners on the racetrack, comes across the line, completes the 5.4 kilometers, and he's 0.6 of a second away from Sergio Perez. Red Bull have been talking about the fact that their 2 drivers like to rotate the car slightly differently. They feel that this year's car satisfies both. If you remember at the start of last year, it was a heavy car. It didn't quite have the front end that Max Verstappen desired. It meant that you had Sergio Perez taking pole positions last year before Max Verstappen, but they are satisfied that both drivers essentially have something that they can manipulate in the way that they want to.
And look at the way the time went away from Max in that run as well, that lap. Lost a lot in the final sector, just a couple of corners there. And maybe just having a bit of overheating on the soft tyres. They'll be really fragile at these temperatures. Of course, they're designed to basically do a qualifying run in the cooler temperatures tomorrow evening. Red Bull's sticking them on now, finding some time, but We're really impressed with the start that Perez has made in this session. Obviously, he's top of the times. We know the Red Bull's going to be there or thereabouts. But sometimes we've seen him for the last few years just building up to it, not being really quick out of the blocks. He's on it from the word go here. Sergio Perez 2.0.
Poor old Bottas had to listen to so much chat about Bottas 2.0 through the last couple of years. But Perez, at the moment, topping the timing page at the circuit, well, the venue, if you like, where he scored his maiden Grand Prix victory back in 2020. Didn't know if he was heading for the exit door. Instead, he was heading for the top step, secured his Formula One future with Red Bull, did a masterful job in playing the team role in 2021. We all know what happened. Tempers fraying at the end of 2022. And if they have an extraordinary amount of pace, we don't know. But if the Red Bulls find themselves in Mercedes territory, or say McLaren territory,
Have a look at the
80s.
pedal, man. It's quite a lot different to last week.
Copy, Joe. We will have a quick look.
Then Perez might find himself as Max Verstappen's only contender, but long way from knowing that at the moment, and we don't expect that to be the case, certainly as we move through. Comparison from testing to Grand Prix weekend spec there from Joe Guan Yu.
Did he say the pedal feels different? I'm assuming he's got just a different feel of the brake pedal is normally the one that you get a...
Have a look at the pedal, man. It's quite a lot different to last week.
Copy, Joe. We will have a quick look.
Heading down towards the big stops, and Joe then just saying something feels a little bit different. Can you have a look? And so with the live telemetry, everyone on the pit wall, his performance engineer on the pit wall, will be having a look and making sure that everything looks under control at Alfa Romeo.
We're on board with Nick de Vries, who's waiting longer still to rotate the car through turn 11 there.
I was watching down there in testing last week, and the understeer that the AlphaTauri seemed to have at that corner particularly was quite stark in contrast to the more established front runners. De Vries on the soft tyre, same as those at the top. Piastri's gone fourth in the McLaren. That's probably the benchmark that De Vries is going to be looking for right now.
Okay, let's hear from Joe again.
Joe, on the pedal position, I don't think we can fix it now. Is it okay to survive FP1 question?
Yep.
Okay, copy.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, then we will fix it for FP2.
Yep. The pedal position. The talk on the radio. So possibly, remember, this is the first time that some of these cars have been driven. The one car was driven all week last week. Now there's a new chassis coming together.
True.
And maybe the pedal position just is outright not set up to Joe's liking.
Okay, looking down there as they will make that change that the team have said for the second hour of free practice. And whilst they consider what to change.
Joe, on the pedal position, I don't think we can fix it now. Is it okay to survive FP1 question?
Yep.
Okay, copy.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, then we will fix it for FP2.
Yep.
Out on the jacks and that front wing being re-attacked. The top element of that front wing, they went on it with the sonic screwdrivers and just lowered that top element of the front wing. So if we were an Indy car, we would say that they were trimming it out. So going for a slightly lower downforce setup on that front wing. And you will see, as you look to the rear of the car, a far different rear wing to the one that we saw in pre-season testing. Everybody said Mercedes is hiding. Mercedes is sandbagging because they're running a big old barn door on the back of the car, the maximum downforce rear wing that they could find. This one, far lower downforce than the one they were running in testing. But yeah, I think the team were just having a little look underneath George's car. Around here, if you hit those curbs a little bit too hard, you can do damage to the tunnels and all of that aero work underneath the car. That's such an important part of the cars in this new modern era of Formula One from 2022 onwards. It's all about that tunneling, that distribution of the airflow underneath the car and getting the ground effect to work. But Lewis Hamilton on the other side of the garage, getting ready to go out. George Russell should be going out soon as well. But yeah, a little bit of changes there, and certainly on the rear and the front wings, just trimming it out, going for a lower downforce settings.
Could be an important change for Mercedes. George alluded to it yesterday, so we've not been running in the optimum downforce configuration, and that was always a concern for them last year. The drag they had inherently on the car. So a skinnier rear wing will of course help the top speed. You lose a little bit of downforce, but it's all in the efficiency of the trade-off between top speed and downforce. And Bahrain's fairly middling on towards the lower downforce end. And so Mercedes managing to trim and find a bit of top speed. Here comes Lance Stroll. End of a first flying lap then finally for him with 24 minutes to go in the session. And he's just got to find his feet now. Goes still to the, doesn't jump up to the bottom of the times, 5 seconds away from Perez's time. It's just still venturing into the unknown.
So getting a feel, he's had no time behind the wheel of the car around this venue compared to everyone else who's had the full expanse of pre-season testing. And the Canadian driver checking his mirrors as the cars cycle through. A couple more laps on the board, as I'm sure you've noticed. The Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas moved up to 3rd place on a soft tyre, albeit nearly 2 seconds off the pace of Sergio Perez. He's down in the garage with Alex Albon, who's done 9 laps so far. A yellow flag in the first part of the lap, only momentarily, so maybe just a wide moment, potentially down at turn 1, and maybe Lando Norris causing it because we've joined him. But the yellow flag coming out for a moment.
He was just starting a push lap, Lando. So on the soft tyres, was ready to go, and I think it was him. Maybe had a bit of a lock up into that first corner. Piastri's McLaren still up in 5th place, 3/10 away from Bottas. A lot of doom-mongerers out there thinking McLaren are going to be even off the back of the pack after what happened. Let's see what happened to Lando. Then starting a flyer. Is the AlphaTauri going to get out of the way? Yes, very nicely. Oh, looks fairly under control, really, but he obviously just felt that he couldn't commit to the corner there or he would have a big lock-up. So in too deep on the brakes. And bailing out of it straight away. And he'll try and go again, I think.
Sailing by, but trying to save the tyres, so he could do exactly that. His teammate in 5th place. A lot of... let's hear from Lance Stroll now. He's on the radio.
Feedback from Carlo is that the brake balance is
Just let me drive the car, yeah.
So Stroll's still getting up to speed out there. And yeah, always entertaining to hear Lance on the radio. His old engineer, the interactions with his old engineer were glorious. But he continues with Ben Michel, who is his race engineer down there at Aston.
He's just done 1 flying lap, and he obviously knows there's so much more on the table, so he just wants to just dial in at his own pace on this run. He's on a flyer again now. He'll just chip away at it. And, oh, big spin for Carlos Sainz.
Whoa, Carlos Sainz off the road, and he will be grateful. There is a car park worth of runoff down at turn 10.
Feedback from Carlo is that the brake balance is
Just let me drive the car, yeah.
Even all the way to the barriers with the way that he lost control, but managed to get it pointing the right way in the runoff. And is that again on that bump coming through turn 9 as you're trying to hit the brakes. Sainz was on a new set of medium tyres, going for a push lap, improved the first sector, leaning on the car. And wow, that let go so suddenly. I think it may well have been on that bump coming through turn 9 as you just start to look for the brake pedal. Wait for a replay, but real heart-in-mouth stuff.
Yeah, dramatic stuff for Carlos Sainz, but crucially, not losing any of the track running. If he'd found the barrier, it would have been end of session. We're going to go on board as we climb the hill. Jolien, talk us through it.
Right, so you're now just looking at this is the hardest corner on the circuit, really, breaking through 9. Oh yeah, so you can hear it on the bump as well. He's gone wider. There's a bump closer to the middle of the track that Piastri hit, and he's taken it actually, I think, on with more G basically because he's tried to open up turn 9, and then he's sweeping through. And as soon as he turned in, hit the bump.
Yeah, I have the box. The ride was quite poor there, guys. Something changed.
You can just see it just tapping away there, and straight into a really high-speed spin. He's routed those tyres. They are flat-spotted, but at least the car stayed out of the wall. Let's have a look again in slow-mo.
Listen in. There you go.
Yeah, it's just the ride of the car then, scraping on the ground and running very low, trying to turn in with a lot of downforce on the car, scraped in the ground. Bit of an aero stall there, as you see. Look at the rear of the car there with the super slow-mo, stalling the ground effect through the high-speed corner, and that's why it snapped so quickly there for Carlos.
He was able to continue, and he was able.
Yeah, I have the box. The ride was quite poor there, guys. Something changed.
Let's head down to Ferrari, where Will is standing by.
And unfortunately, I can't show you the tyres because they've already got the blankets on top of them. Just underneath that Velcro attachment at the top is where the flat spot is. That's the rear right of Carlos Sainz's car when we saw the four of them come off. As you said, Jolien, absolutely rooted. Massive flat spots on each of the four. They're done. They're toast. Stick them in the skip. As for the car itself, the guys already, of course, having a look underneath, because as you so wonderfully pointed out, you could hear it, you can see it, that car bottoming out over that bump. How much damage would that have done to the very fragile tunneling underneath that Ferrari?
Not a good start for Ferrari. One car, and I don't know if Carlos has got more tyres to throw at that. That was a new set of tyres there. 18 minutes to go. He's managed to get back to the garage. He's staying in the car for now, so maybe they can send it back out again. But I'm sure those tyres, as Will says, will go to the skip. And they really needed a little bit more running at the moment. They have not gone onto a soft tyre yet. It was mediums onto mediums there for Carlos. Still down in 14th and 17th, and Charles yet to leave the pits on a second set.
Okay, bit of a roundup for you. Earlier on, if you were watching and wondering what the problem was for Lance Stroll at Aston Martin, it was an ignition problem. The team have reported, and you might have seen on social media earlier, there was a bit of chatter about Lewis Hamilton being investigated for breaching the sporting code for wearing jewellery. Yes, this thrilling topic is back in all of our lives. Thankfully, though, the stewards have decided no further action, which means that we can stop talking about that and start talking about cars on track. Specifically, the driver heading into his second season of Formula One. He got good reviews for his rookie year. He also had by far the most dramatic accident of anyone in the field. Cost him a little bit of confidence. I thought he was in a really good place. Certainly one lap pace was in a really good place before Silverstone, and that slightly fell away. Zhou Guanyu making his way out of turn 13, and look out for turn 13 later on. It's a real benchmark of whether the car is behaving the way a driver wants. It's a corner that we always keep an eye on. Turn 11, turn 13 usually gives you the clue, other than the lap time that he's going to set right about now. And he goes across the line ahead of his teammate, and his teammate is going to be crucial for him as he looks to extend his deal in Formula One, and he is ahead of Valtteri Bottas on a 1:34.575.
Track getting better all the while. Lando did manage to get a time in the McLaren the lap after he aborted, and he's got third in that McLaren. The track evolution here is quite a lot. Even though the rubber was laid down last week, you still get the sand and grit off the surface in the opening laps, and that's why sometimes traditionally with an hour and a half session people would be waiting as it used to be, but now it's an hour. They have to press on. The track gets better, and Norris has taken advantage to go third. Joe has gone ahead of Valtteri Bottas. That's a good lap. I tell you what stands out though is Alonso still sitting in sixth on that early medium tyre lap. That's really decent from him in the Aston Martin, waiting for a set of something to go on for a second run, but he's just sitting in the garage. He's been there for a while.
Okay, Charles Leclerc is heading to turn number one. Information from the pit lane is that there's the double support on that rear wing after we saw flexing in the earlier. Charles Leclerc, winner of the Grand Prix, thrilling Grand Prix to open up Formula One in 2022. He took his maiden pole position here as well, pole and the win. Excellent stuff for him around this circuit. He's also won here in Formula 2. It is a track that suits him. Let's find out whether this car suits him at the moment. First sector, half a second off, but he is on the medium tyres.
He's a couple of tenths up on what his teammate was doing when he spun at this corner just a few moments ago, Carlos Sainz. And look, Charles on a much tighter line coming through turn 9. So I think Carlos with a lot of load, a lot more steering angle, then swept over that bump and lost control. The drivers, I mean, they've been doing this place for such a long time now. Been in Bahrain over a week. and now they shouldn't be finding new parts, but obviously lowering the car, getting into more racy trim, you do find more things out. Called out Carlos Sainz, has not called out Charles Leclerc. He's looking all right through 2 sectors. Medium tyres compared to everyone at the top of the times on the softs. Just fighting the car a little bit at the rear, coming through 13. Let's see what he does into the final corner. Just looks slightly on edge on the rear end. Again, the soft tyres, you pick up more rear grip, so that will help. But I don't think it's going to make a second and a half of difference at the moment.
4th place for Charles Leclerc as the monogas driver goes over the line. 2.5 seconds away from the benchmark pace set by Sergio Perez a few minutes ago. Let's hear.
Definitely something strange with the clutch, but just going out the carrera, I don't think it's a problem. When I take it back, it seems to, I don't know, to remain, to not go fully back.
He's thinking about how to describe the problem as he was describing the problem there. Something not to his liking. This is turn 13 again.
Yeah, just a little bit on the edge in the heat of the day on a medium tyre. It will all come to all of the drivers, the grip, particularly on the rear end. And Leclerc's issue on the... you only use the clutch in a Formula 1 car when you're pulling away or starting, so that won't have affected anything on a flying lap for Charles. It sounds like when he was releasing the clutch and then pulled it back in, and as he pulled it back in, it just wasn't.
Definitely something strange with the clutch, but just going out the carrera, I don't think it's a problem. When I take it back, it seems to, I don't know, to remain, to not go fully back.
Moved at the time, I believe it was to 12th place. So George Russell's in 11th on the medium tyre. That time set just now in the last few moments, and big gap on the medium tyres. Give you the temperatures again. The track temperature is 39 degrees, air temperature 26 out there, as Verstappen, with the soft tyres bolted to the car, continues on his way. And what was his lap time across the line there? So he's continuing to run. Adrian Newey, for 3 decades, designing or consulting over the design team that put Formula 1 drivers on the top step of the podium, and unparalleled record of success for sure. Formula 1's greatest designer.
It still feels like there's a problem with the hold revs.
We'll have a look. At the moment, Fernando Alonso is on the soft tyre then. We waited a long time to see this Aston Martin fully fledged with Alonso at the wheel on the softs, and it was within a tenth of Sergio Perez through the first sector. A lot of people excited about this car and driver combination. Fernando looked so on it from the first day in the car last week. Wasn't in for the first morning. Felipe Drugovich was driving. Fernando hopped in at lunchtime and was right on the limit. Straight away, no level of building up. Feels at home in the team, and he might have just moved to Aston Martin at the right time.
Has he finally timed one correctly after driver moves that promised so much and didn't materialise? Let's be honest, wasted years, wasted talent at McLaren when he had such high hopes returning to the team. And middle section of the lap, 0.3 of a second off. But this is going to be encouraging for Aston Martin. Remember, their goal is not to fight with Red Bull. That was not their goal at the start of the year. Their goal was simply to move forward, few eyebrows raised, when Fernando Alonso chose to leave the 4th best team in Formula 1 for the 7th best team in Formula 1. But they are a team with momentum, and over the line for Fernando Alonso to go P2 on a soft tyre ahead of the world champion. And if you're on board that hype train, maybe it's moving even quicker.
It's a little flex there, isn't it? Little flex from Aston Martin. We're going to get a smile out of Martin Whitmarsh. No, we're not. No, stern face as ever.
Game
smiles, but he has just split the Red Bulls. Now the track is getting better. The Red Bulls were one of the early teams to switch on to that set of soft tyres. So the comparison is, the comparison with all of these times in FP1, you have to take with a slight pinch of salt. But the gap that Alonso has put to all the rest of the midfield is a second. There's at the moment a huge gap in times between the top 3 and Norris in 4th. Norris 1.4 seconds off Perez. Alonso just 0.4 away.
Yeah, Norris's time set on the soft tyre, Leclerc's time set on the medium. Worth clarifying the difference between those two. And looking in at driver number 10, now with Alpine, Pierre Gasly wanted this move. He wanted an opportunity to leave the Red Bull stable, a team that he was with for a long time in Formula One, a race winner with AlphaTauri, memorably so in Monza 2020. And now, after 108 races split between Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri and Red Bull, he gets his opportunity elsewhere. It's a works drive once again, and he will be the story between Ocon and Gasly. It's going to be a fascinating element of Formula One in 2023.
And we're going to get a first little glimpse at the balance of power within the team on this run. Gasly on a medium. Ocon's just done a 35.1. Ocon been with Alpine or Renault for a long time now. Gasly moving across, an all-French lineup. And there is everyone's talking about this dynamic between them. Used to be mates, then they fell out somewhere along the line. I've heard that story before. A little bit of chattering from the rear tyres there from Gasly coming out at turn 10. Opens it up. Carlos Sainz is back out. You can see him in the background of the Ferrari. He's out on a U set of tyres, so the session didn't go in the bin with his tyres after that spin, but he's not panning around particularly representatively at the moment. And Gasly is not either.
Hamilton's just gone over the line, and he set a 1:34.9. That's the 9th fastest time on the medium tyre, but a long way adrift from what Charles Leclerc was able to do in the Ferrari a few minutes ago.
Yeah, it is a personal best in the middle sector for Pierre. Here he comes driving to the line. Medium tyres, still Alpine holding their cards close to their chest. 16th for Gasly with that one. 3/10 away from Ocon. That's an all right start, I think. Bearing in mind,
now it's updated.
Yeah, it's a little bit slow, the timing screen.
We're getting there. Everyone's building up in the first session.
Brake temps are okay. We're checking the pedal. We can see the stiffness drop. We don't see any major issue. We're investigating.
We move there. And Lance Stroll has now bolted on the soft tyres to the car. So now we'll see Lance pushing. He's got his teammates' superb benchmark up there. Alonso, the oldest driver in the field. Stroll returning after this mystery accident, which we don't really and won't really get a full explanation for. But either way, he's back in the car and he's attacking turn 4.
Hit a pothole on a bike. Came down and hurt both wrists. It's the official explanation from Lance. On a flying lap now then, on the soft tyres, that is a personal best first sector. The colours underneath the time on your screen not doing his first sector justice there. 3/10 away from Perez. It's a tough break for Lance Stroll, excuse the pun, with Alonso coming into the team, really competitive teammate, and doing so much running, decent running, 2 days, all the evening sessions when the track's at its best, and really getting his feet under the table within the Aston Martin team. You ask the reserve driver, Stoffel Van Dorn, how tough it is going up against Fernando Alonso, and many a driver has found out. Lance did have a bit of continuity there at Aston Martin, having been at the team for a while, but Fernando has not taken any time to get up to speed. A little bit of corrections at the wheel coming out of the final corner.
Bit of wildlife. So it's nowhere near the racing line. Lance Stroll's over the line. We're going to zoom out. It's okay. They're deep into turn 1. And whilst we try and work out what bird that is...
Is it a Bahrainian fowl?
We will bring Sam in, who can give us some more data.
That sounds like something you can say to Tim the Sorcerer there, Jolien. To spoil the party, the hype train, the Aston Martin hype train slightly, I did it slightly earlier on, and this isn't conclusive, and this is based on some data that's a little bit sort of worked out. I do believe that on every run so far this session, the Aston Martins, both of them, Stroll and Alonso, have been running 9 kilograms lighter on fuel load than the Red Bull. So the Red Bulls do seem to have a pace advantage like for like on the same tyres than the Aston Martin. However, with that said, Aston Martin do seem to have a pace advantage over some of the other cars, like the Alfa Romeos and the Alfa Tauris, who are running similar sort of fuel loads to Aston Martin at this point. So Aston Martin, in my mind, at this point of the session, which is very early on, have certainly moved up through the field. How far forward they've moved is still a matter of discussion.
Dampens the spirit.
And the hype train shudders to a halt. A moment to remember the hype train that existed for 1 week. No, thank you, Sam. Thank you for the data. Sam across all of the data at Biggin Hill and in the UK, and terrific to have him across that, because we're trying to give you the most complete picture. That's why we go double box. That's why we have a fantastic team going through all the aspects, and that is a key piece of data, because it means that the picture is not quite what the stopwatch says as we go driver's eye view with Oscar Piastri on this ludicrous winning run in the Junior Championships. He achieves his dream of making it to Formula One. The driver mentored and managed by Grand Prix winner Mark Webber. And Webber getting him to the McLaren team. Plenty of team principals moving. Seidel, who was very highly rated, had a lot of offers, decided to take up Audi's offer, and that has placed him at Sauber earlier than expected after Fred Vasseur moved to Ferrari. And so now Andrea Stella, the team principal at McLaren, working with Piastri and Norris. Piastri gears up for his first Grand Prix start. Someone's sparking down there at the first turn, and Piastri is going to complete his lap, and he continues on his way on a slightly longer run.
Yeah, getting some high fuel running then in the McLaren, something they didn't get a huge amount of last week with their inherent issues with reliability. Suffered all pre-season testing last year with the brakes, and then the wheel brows this year causing them to be in the garage for longer than they would have liked. Did the fewest laps of anyone.
We're into the final 2 minutes. This is absolutely roared by. Wonderful to be up and running once again for Formula One in 2023. Got a yellow flag in Sector 1. Someone deep there, or potentially we get a check of the virtual safety car every now and then.
Hope the Bahraini foul.
And
hope they moved. The yellow flag was it down at turn 1?
It's usually down at turn 1. If you just get a flash for the rest of the weekend, it's usually someone's gone deep at turn 1. We'll auto trigger the graphics. Give you that guide for the rest of everyone watching all around the world. Give you that guide. 2-minute warning for the opening session of Formula One in 2023. It's Perez, Alonso, Verstappen, Norris, and Charles Leclerc. The top 4 all set their lap times on the soft tyre. And Logan Sargent's road to F1 record there on the right-hand side. 4th place in F2. That's not entirely representative. You think 4th place, why has he got promoted? Well, I can tell you that he's got promoted because he was in championship contention at one point, then had a couple of retirements, didn't work out well, not his fault on those two, ruined his championship momentum. He was a 2-time race winner back last year at Austria and Silverstone, and he makes his way through to be, he will hope, the first American driver to complete a full season since Scott Speed in 2006. He was racing with Toro Rosso, as it was then.
What have we learned from this hour, Jakesy?
Let's go through it. Red Bull looking mighty, as expected. We're running at a time of day that we wouldn't run qualifying, so we can't draw too many conclusions. Lance Stroll has withstood the test. His first test has been ticked. He's able to run in the car. He's a little bit adrift of his teammate down there in 6th place, but he's able to run in the car, so no major concerns after he had an ignition problem early on. I don't think Mercedes will be delighted with the pace that we've seen on that medium tyre. They did not run the soft tyre in the way that Perez, Alonso and Verstappen did. And the midfield, I don't think it looks as bad for McLaren as many were fearing down in the paddock.
Yeah, I would say that they're probably raising their own hopes at the moment with this hour of running. Norris 4th. Ferrari and Mercedes are below where we would expect them to be, but neither of those two teams have run a soft tyre. So they're saving a set of soft tyres for later on in the weekend, whereas Red Bull and Aston Martin have burnt up a set of softs, along with a lot of the other teams out there as well. Alfa Romeo, Haas, burning up their soft tyres at this stage in the most unrepresentative session of the weekend. Albon steaming up behind McLaren there. Piastri on an outlap, and Albon getting a little bit bulked on a flying lap. Cue an angry radio message.
What is he doing? Always makes me laugh when the drivers are fuming in an FP1. But I will leave it to your insight. Checkered flag is out. First hour of Formula One in 2023 is complete. It is done. And it is Sergio Perez at the top of the pile, ahead of Fernando Alonso. The hype train in motion, but slightly slowed by the information from Sam Collins that they were doing it on a lighter fuel load to the Red Bulls.
We should have muted him.
Yeah.
We should have muted him.
The hype train laughs in the face of facts. It's not happening. Hamilton, not thrilled, I imagine, with 10th place. He's ahead of his teammate George Russell, so it seems representatively to be where they are. But the caveat that we issued in testing, that we'll issue now, Gasly was top of this session last year. We're going to get a proper picture. We're finally going to get a definitive answer when we get to FP2.
Yeah, in reality, the times here are pretty meaningless. You can see the trends of things, and that's where Alonso, yeah, maybe he's on a lighter fuel load to split the Red Bulls. I'm sure he is. People are expecting him to be good, but not that good. He is, though, a second clear of everyone else other than a Red Bull. So that is a big gap to be falling back into. Aston Martin do look like they're genuinely quick, and they've backed it up right now. He was also quicker than the Mercedes on that first medium run as well. We don't know the fuel loads. Mercedes doing their own run plan, as were Ferrari. Neither really showing anything close to their hands. Maybe Red Bull weren't either, but certainly the trends you can take. McLaren right in the mix in that midfield, given the tyres, and Red Bull, no competition really in that. We don't know what Ferrari and Mercedes did, but Aston Martin cementing their position as the midfield favourite at the very least.
Fernando Alonso, the oldest driver on the grid, 41. He's 3 years older than Lewis Hamilton, but he's second in the order.
He must have such a grin on his face underneath that tinted visor.
Finally, after struggling to get a car that could reflect his talents, are we going to see the two-time world champion in the hunt for something at the sharp end?
And you can see when you're driving around at various points on the track, you can see the big screens, and he'll at some point look up on this slow lap and see that everyone's panning in on him, and he'll think, yeah, here we go. Let's all talk about Aston Martin. They look good. He looks hooked up. He must be really, really happy at the moment.
The man who said last year he felt he was getting back to his best. Let's go on board with Alex Albon. We're going to head to turn 13. And this is going to be the angry team radio message with the McLaren ahead.
That was close as well. Really chucked it to the apex. We're going to wait for the team radio beep. We're not going to get one.
I don't think we're going to get one.
Mellow Albon.
Well,
right at the end of the section.
He is a nice guy.
He is, yeah. There's only so angry that he does get. But he did. He really launched it towards the apex, and Piastri there needed a bit of information maybe from the engineer. You've got to build up that dialogue as a rookie. Get used to having cars steaming up behind you on flying laps. It's a tricky zone there through 11, 12 and into 13. And he was certainly in the way of Albon. I'd hope that Albon had that under control and it wasn't quite as close to a crash as it seemed on board there.
Practice starts being completed on the main straight here at Bahrain International. Plenty of crowd in, as you can see on the left-hand side. The way that grandstand arches, it creates a phenomenal roar when they build up and they do their practice starts. And we are finally underway then. An FP2 to come later on, which will give us even more information. But it's Sergio Perez, not Max Verstappen, who is at the top of the timing page. And then Norris setting his fourth place time on the soft tyre. It was the medium tyre for Charles Leclerc in fifth. And Stroll was on the sixth. He was in sixth and on the soft tyre, as was Magnussen, Zhou Guanyu, and Valtteri Bottas. Lewis Hamilton rounding out the top 10 as Mercedes don't show initial pace at the start of the season. Well, we've learned a little bit, but your full lesson in Formula One this season comes your way later on when we have another hour of running. You said earlier on when practice sessions were 90 minutes. And I can't believe they were ever 90 minutes. I cannot believe that was the length. The most dramatic moment of the session, Carlos Sainz with the spin.
Well, they'd be 90 minutes, but everyone would sit in the garage for the first 30.
Basically, stuck a podcast on the start.
Yeah.
And then finally get to the on-track running. Yeah, I think an hour far more appropriate for practice sessions.
It was a pretty clean session that overall as well, wasn't it? Stroll late out, but still managed 17 laps and got himself up to 6th in the other Aston Martin, second off Alonso, which is not terribly shabby considering it's his first look at driving the new car. And first and only run on a soft tyre at the end there. Of course, he'll be aiming to get much closer than that. But he at least hauled it up into the top 10. Sainz had his big spin, ended up plumb last in that one because he went back to a used tyre. Apart from that, fairly clean.
So, as the pit lane is a hive of activity, let's confirm the first results page we can bring you for Formula One this season, this campaign. And it's Sergio Perez, a winner around this venue, I should say, who is fastest. Fernando Alonso in second. Continue that hype train all the way to P2. He's ahead of the world champion, who was third. Then came Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Lance Stroll, Kevin Magnussen, Joe Bottas, and Lewis Hamilton rounding out the top 10 on the medium tyre. You can see the different tyres on the right-hand side there that everyone used. Sam Collins telling us that the data suggests that Alonso had slightly less fuel in the car, and Norris's fourth place will maybe alleviate some of the fears Woking on the performance of what they've got underneath them. George Russell heads up the start of the second page, tells a story of where Mercedes are at the moment. Then it's Oscar Piastri in 12th, then Tsunoda ahead of Hulkenberg, who makes his return in 14th, and then it's Ocon, De Vries, Gasly, Sargent, Albon, and Sainz, who had the spin, who completes the field. Let's take a look at what's coming your way on F1 TV. So Perez has topped practice 1. We'll do it all again for practice 2 under the floodlights of local time. And then the last time to dial in the car, after all the test running, after all the hype and anticipation, I cannot wait to get to qualifying. Also 6 o'clock local time. And then Grand Prix Sunday, the main event, the opening Grand Prix of the season on F1 TV, as we get set for one of the best venues. It always trends high with overtakes compared to the season average. This place is just phenomenal for racing. Okay, thanks to Jolyon Palmer for his insights through the session, along with Sam Collins as well, and Will Buxton. And now we will send it downstairs to Laura Witt.